right. Hey there. Welcome to Tuesday in the Trenches. Hopefully, Coach Glenn and I have got our tech hats on, maybe our tech headphones on, to try and have a little smoother night tonight. But anything's possible with technology, so we'll see how that goes. Hey, Butch, how you doing?
Hey, Butch.
So tonight we are going to discuss why we should be spending more time on offensive line skills, and first off, explain why we feel offensive line is a skilled position. So we're going to get to that. First, I just want to say again, welcome. Our trench training sessions are open for registration right now in Wisconsin and in Northern Illinois. You can go to trenchtraining.com, click on our training tab, and you will see it says training sessions. Go under winter training sessions. You can pick a location and register there. We can register online now. You can also pay online with a credit card, which is great. Gives us a lot more flexibility and makes it a little easier to keep track of everything. But we ask that people please pre-register. Pre-registration is going to be something we make mandatory. It doesn't mean you don't have to pay online, but you do need to register prior to our session starting. Our first session starts December 4th, right, Coach? I think I have it
Yes,
right.
it does.
It's the first Sunday in December, so we will get things started there, and we're excited to get started with that. I know we've got some kids that are still playing football down in Illinois, and maybe a couple here in Wisconsin too yet, right, Coach? I don't know, but
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so we've still got some kids playing, so I'll let you guys finish your season, that's for sure, and good luck if you have games this weekend. We're ready to go. We met today, Coach and I met today, and we're starting to put together everything for these training sessions. So, all right, so let's get back to our topic. Our topic tonight, again, why spend more time on offensive line skills? So, Coach, why is offensive line a skilled position?
Well, actually, Steve, I was looking up just before here. I'm going to pull it up here, and it is the definition of what a skill is. And a skill is the ability to carry out a task with predetermined results, often within a given amount of time, energy, or both. So basically, if you look at what a skill is, it is a prescribed ability to do something. And the reason why we believe that offensive line and defensive line are skilled positions, and for me, I think the biggest thing is it's a completely unnatural, difficult position to play. You put your body in a position that normally you don't see kids out on the playground in offensive line or defensive line positions running around. So it's a skill that you have to develop, and it's a skill different than most any other position. And I was trying to think about today how many other positions in other sports that are similar to offense and defensive line, and I couldn't really come up with any. Maybe a goalie in hockey, they have to get in some pretty precarious positions. Maybe, I guess you could look at rugby, but, other sports like basketball, tennis, soccer, volleyball, you don't really put your body in a position that it's not able to do what it's done its whole entire life on the playground. So for me, I think it's a highly technical skill, and it's something that you have to repetitively work on over and over and over again in order to master and get good at.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about this before about how line, playing in the line is an unnatural act. It's not, throwing, catching, running, kicking. Those are all very natural things for our body to do, as opposed to getting in the stance or, playing with leverage. Those are things that really take a lot of time and repetition to learn. And there are a lot of things we can be doing in the off season to help with that. And obviously we go through a lot of those at trench training and our weekly sessions, but there's a lot of things kids can be doing with 15 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 20 minutes in the yard or in their living room or in the gym, whatever. There are things that they can be doing that are going to have a huge impact on their improvement throughout the years. And it's if you're just willing to put in a little of that extra time. We see quarterbacks out throwing, in gymnasiums. We see receivers out there catching and running routes. We see, running backs doing ball drills and different things. Why don't we see more linemen doing, the kinds of drills that are going to make them better throughout the year? And I think that's kind of the thing that we've talked about is there's so many things we can do. And with linemen, a lot of times I think we just say, well, just get bigger, lift. Obviously, but everybody's doing that. You have to do that at every position. It's not just linemen. It's not just defense or offensive linemen. Everybody's got to be lifting. That's an obvious one. That's something we have to do no matter what. That doesn't necessarily help us develop skills, though. And what we're talking about is developing specific skills in our positions. And those are things that we can spend a little extra time on. Even if it's even if you don't do it in the winter or the spring, in the summertime. That's why we have camps. That's why we have clinics. That's why we have, we're going to have online content for kids to work on some of this stuff. And it really should be a bigger focus on all football teams. Coach and I were talking about this today. Nearly half of the team on the field on offense is offensive line.
Right.
And yet we spend the least amount of time working on their skills. That just doesn't make sense, does it? And so it only makes sense that we spend a lot of time on that because it's half our team. You count the tight end, which, the tight end, at least 2/3 of his game is gonna involve exactly what those other guys are doing. I know not all teams play with a tight end, but many of them do, and a lot of those skills have to translate to the tight end position. And when that's the case, now over half your team needs to know those skills. It needs to learn those skills.
Yeah, and the other thing that I find kind of, I guess comical to watch, and you talk about pass protection, and you throw a running back in there and tell him to block an outside linebacker and say, well, yeah, he's got to learn how to pass block. How much time does he really spend on? And you watch it in practice. You'll be doing a scrimmage or a live drill, and the defensive end's going to come flying upfield, and the running back's expected to block him. And they give him about 5 minutes in every practice, maybe at the most, to work on that. And so a lot of times that's where sacks come from, is the running backs trying to go out and block these defensive guys in pass blocking. It is a definite skill to be able to pass block some of the, especially at the upper levels where some of these guys are so unbelievably quick, and they're doing all their different drills defensively and offensively. So I think, when you break it down into the different things that linemen are required and asked to do, it's a skill that's exactly or very similar to the mechanics of throwing a football. The mechanics of taking the right step, looking and catching the ball, having your hands in the right position, all the things that the so-called skilled players are performing and getting better is the exact same thing that offense and defensive linemen need to be doing on a regular basis. And they really typically only do it during training camp. And then you have a little bit of individual time, but most head coaches that I know and I've been around, they start to limit the individual time so that they can get more team time and more, scrimmage type stuff going to get ready for the next team. So all of a sudden now all that skill time and that individual time is reduced. And now you're expecting players to keep their skill level up. Well, if you don't do this all through the off season and get it so that it's a muscle memory. And one of the things that I really saw when I was up at Green Bay was there's a couple players that were really struggling with when a defensive end would do one of these little jukes like this, and they couldn't get their feet to move quick enough. So they'd stay after practice, and I'd watch them practice this over and over and over again. But as soon as they did the little juke, they couldn't get their feet to move right, and so they were getting beat all the time. And what I thought of that after, once I started coaching, is I realized we've got these neurons that go from our heads, and if we're 6'6" like I am, that's a long ways for that message to go from here all the way down to the foot to tell it to move. So when you're in a position to try and block somebody and they're putting on all these moves and you're looking at them, at the same time you're looking at them, it's hand-eye coordination, or I think it's foot-eye coordination. Your feet have to move with these people to keep yourself in the right position. That doesn't happen naturally. You have to work at this over and over and over again. You have to see it. You have to feel it. You have to start getting your memory, your brain memory, so that it's telling the feet, oh, when he does this, I got to do that. Or when all of a sudden you see a guy turn and go in to blow up your guy next door, you got to realize there's a guy coming back around the other side. There's so many things that the head has to have skill and memory and reaction to, that you can't just do it in a 3-week training camp and get it and be really good at it. And so the really good linemen, the Joe Thomases of the world, the guys that are really, phenomenal, like when I watch Joel Hilgenberg and Stan Brock and some of these guys, you could see that they have been practicing all off season. They're practicing, on their own, in their heads, in their in their rooms, wherever. They're working this stuff over and over and over again because it's that important.
Yeah. And whoops, here, feedback a little bit. Okay. Yep. We're good. Okay. There are 4 offensive line skills that we talked about in our article today, and Coach has touched on one there, but we'll go back to the first one. That one is stance, because I think everything starts with that. And you might ask, well, is stance really a skill? And it is, because again, we talked about how unnatural it is to get in that position. And if you can't make yourself comfortable in your stance, you're going to struggle. You just are. And your stance will suffer. Your ass will come up. You'll have too much knee bend, or your hips won't be flexible enough. You're not going to have your eyes where they need to be. You're not going to be able to come out of that stance well. It's got to become just part of what you do. It's got to become a completely natural, taking an unnatural act and turning it into a natural action or activity for us to be doing 50 plays a night. So hey, Scott.
It's real common. I see it all the time where you work real hard to get a kid into his correct stance, and then 2 weeks into the season, you see his feet start to spread apart, or you see his butt start to go down or up, whichever. And it's because they're not strong enough. They haven't done it enough. They haven't repetitively been doing it over and over and over again to make that an automatic, this is exactly the same stance you get into every single time. And again, reiterating that it's something that you got to do more than just 2 or 3 weeks in training camp.
Yeah, and it's got to be conditioned. It's got to be conditioned in your body. It's got to be conditioned in your brain. And the reason I put this one first is because I believe, and I know Coach will agree with this, without a great stance, you're never going to be a great player, because you're never going to have that foundation you need to do all the things you need to do out of a stance. Go in any direction. As an offensive lineman, you need to be able to go in any direction. So if you don't have balance and you don't have power in your stance, nothing's going to ever become great for you as a lineman. And I would say the same thing goes for a defensive player as well. But we're talking about offensive line tonight. But it all starts with a great stance, and that's why we do work on that quite a bit in our training program. Is making sure that we really work and stress that great stance in everything you do, no matter what the drill is.
And defensive line, they have to get in the right stance so they can get their hands going as fast as they possibly can, while being fast, but also being strong, because you got to play both the run and the pass. So you're absolutely correct, Stephen, that it absolutely has to be the most important thing for an offensive or defensive lineman to perfect and to get into the correct and proper stance for their body type, because not everyone's going to be in the exact same stance. A lot of it depends on your body type. If you're a type of guy who has shorter legs and a longer torso, or vice versa, your stance is going to look a little bit different. And the basics of it is the same, but it's going to be different for each person. You have to really work through that and spend a lot of energy and time on perfecting that skill.
Yeah, for sure. The second one we talked about was footwork, and this really encompasses a lot of things. Okay, it's a very broad topic, footwork. But one of the things I wanted to stress was the fact that speed in the offensive line isn't a necessity, but agility is. We talked about this last week when we talked about hip flexibility and explosiveness. And, the first part is getting in that perfect stance, whatever that perfect stance is for you. But the second thing is coming out of it. You have to be able to come out of it. You have to be able to come out of it with power, with quickness. And when I say speed's not a necessity, again, I'm not saying that you don't have to be quick. You do. Quickness is different than speed. You have to have quickness. You have to have agility, and that's part of agility is that quickness. And I think having that fast feet allows you to have good body position. So, once you get in a good stance, you have to work on getting out of it, and that's where working on power steps and drive steps. And I didn't want to get into what kind of steps you take because it's going to differ with what system you're in. Okay, obviously Coach and I come from more of a zone program. I know Coach has blocked zone, and gap stuff, and so we do a lot of power steps and drive steps. We did bucket and drop steps in the zone scheme. Whatever it is, you need to be working on getting out of your stance and taking those steps. And I think regardless of what system you're in, it's just a matter of being able to get out of that stance and make the steps and the footwork that you need to in order to maintain strength and leverage and balance.
One of the things that I've learned a lot over the years too is that it's not necessarily how fast and how quick you can get somewhere. It's also how much you can keep your whole foot on the ground, so you continually remain. You keep power with you everywhere you go. Sometimes, like myself, I used to have troubles where my feet were going really quick, but the problem with that is I'd get there quick, but then once I got there, my feet are light. I had what they called light feet, so I was real light on my feet. But sometimes when you're getting to a big, giant, strong dude and your feet are light and they're not always on the ground, you get moved around a lot. Where I see guys that maybe aren't quite as fast, their feet are always on the ground. They're always direct, so they're very powerful with their feet. And I think that's something to look at on the offense and defensive line both is you always have to have power when you're taking your steps and where you're going. And it's not about speed. I agree with the quickness part, but I also think it's how quick can you get your foot back on the ground. So you're keeping your feet on the ground at all times and not up in the air like, a runner where he's running. You got to keep your feet quickly getting back on the ground. And that's where you have the power when you're going through like a long-term block where you have to maintain power for 2 or 3 seconds or more.
Well, and we've talked about this with the kids all this last year. And I know I've been talking for years, even when we coached zone, and it's something that I learned, but it doesn't matter what you play. Trying to keep your whole foot in the ground too, because there are a couple things that I see. One of the things I see from kids is sometimes they have happy feet, and that might be what you're talking about with the light feet, Coach, where their feet are out of the ground too much. They're moving their feet.
They're on their toes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the second part of that is being on their toes too much. Even if you do have your foot in the ground, if you've got feet that go like this all the time, you're not keeping them in the ground. You have to have deliberate footwork, and I guess that's one of the distinctions that I always make is deliberate feet and keeping that whole foot in the ground. We went up, Coach and I went up and met with Coach Rudolph, the offensive line coach at Wisconsin, and I actually saw he had a picture of a foot, the outline of a foot on his board. I don't know if Coach saw that. I think we were talking about it. Yeah. And he actually showed the spots in the instep and the inside of the foot, if you can imagine the 5 toes, and keeping the on the inside of the foot, keeping the weight on the inside ball of the big toe and the couple of inside knuckles of the foot to try and keep the weight on the insteps. You know, because if you think about it, guys, how often when you're squatting are you up on your toes? You don't get on your toes when you squat. How often are you on the outside of your feet? How often are your feet like that? I can't do this very good in the screen here, but how often are your feet like this when you squat? They're not. You've got all the weight on the inside going down through the inside of your legs, the inside of your knees, and the weight goes on that instep. And that's why, and there's no reason we shouldn't be stepping that same way. Because, again, that's going to give us more force and more power and more leverage when we block. And so keeping that whole foot in the ground is a huge thing. And I think that's, again, something that needs to be conditioned. We talked about doing duck walks. You know, I know that the kids have, in our program, heard that term before, and pounding the ground so that we hear their whole foot hitting the ground instead of just being up on the toes and hearing the little chop. That's not what we want. We want to see that whole foot in the ground. So footwork is a big one.
And there's many coaches, I've heard them myself, and I've seen them over the years, that will say use choppy steps. And I've gotten to where I don't like that term, because choppy involves going like this. Instead, it's more power. It's bam, 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 power steps. You know, when you're driving your foot into the ground, you almost try and drive your toe through the front of your shoe, and you pound it into the ground, because that's planting that foot into the ground, and you keep pounding power, 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 power. That's much better than choppy, 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 because choppy teaches the kids to have light feet. And you want them to basically have heavy, powerful feet. So really emphasize power. So when anything that you're doing as an offensive or defensive lineman, you want to have powerful feet and powerful legs. So you're pounding everything into the ground and driving it. And it will make you a stronger, better player.
Heavy feet, Coach. I'm going to write that down. I like that. Got to have heavy feet.
Heavy, thick feet. Yep.
Heavy, powerful steps. Deliberate, heavy steps.
Right.
So it's important. All right. So the next one we talked about is punch. And, you know, there's a few things about punch. Obviously, we want to have strong punch. We're not punching anybody in the jaw. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
But there's a few things we talk about. We talk about tight hands. You know, we talk to the kids about keeping a W. I know in college, a lot of them have thumbs up now. They're actually using more of a thumbs up approach than even having hands out. I still like to teach the younger kids the W and the open hands as opposed to turning like this. I think when you get into this, you know, unless you're a really skilled player that's been playing a while, I think this has a tendency to turn into this. And I worry a little bit about that. I like seeing this because there's really no way you're going to spread the hands apart if your thumbs are together.
Right.
You know, you're just not going to. You're always going to keep them tight, and keeping tight elbows too. So we're not like this. We're like this. And you can't have a W with your elbows out, right? And so we want to keep those in, because if you think about it, that's where all our power and our leverage comes from, are those tight elbows, and not this stuff. We don't want to do diamond push-ups, because then all we're using are those triceps. So that, as well as the speed of our punch. You know, we're going to have a more powerful punch with our thumbs up in the W, but we also need to work on hand speed. And again, hand speed is another thing that comes with repetition. You know, it comes with, you know, with punching bags. It comes with, you know, working on hand drills throughout the year, because, you know, Coach, you and I have talked about this too with kids, is, you know, powerful hands don't always win.
Right.
Fast hands almost always win. You know, the guy with the quicker hands that gets them inside and gets them on the body first, those guys are going to win. Now, they may get overpowered, but when you have that initial win, it's going to give a lighter, smaller, weaker guy a better chance at making a block. Now, you couple that with a big, strong guy, and that's where they become dominant, right?
Right. The other thing I think is really important, and I got the opportunity recently, someone posted a video from back when I played, so I sat down and watched it. And one of the things that I was doing back then that I don't think we were taught was I had my hands down. So you get out of your stance, I had my hands down around my thighs in it. What I've been noticing with a lot of my guys is when I'm coaching them is the tendency is to keep your hands down and punch from down around your waist. You need to get out of your stance with your hands up here so everything is a 6-inch punch from right here. So when you're in your position and you let your hands drop down, you're opening your chest for them to grab you. It's taking a lot longer for you to get your hands up in position to get to them. And when you're doing drills without like live against somebody else, the tendency is for people to drop their hands down to their sides and do all this stuff down here. Practice everything in the off season, everything that you're doing, every drill you're doing, practice getting your hands up into this position, like Steve said, into the W's, or even more out like this, and keep them up here, not down here. Keep them up. You know, you gotta teach your hands, teach your arms, teach everything to be up in a position like this at all times, because the habit and the natural thing for people to do is to drop their hands down.
Right. And one of the things that I was thinking about, Coach, and this is something we haven't talked about, but I always think now, I want to keep my elbows in front of my body. And you think about that, okay? Yep. If my elbows are behind my chest or behind my belly, or behind my midsection, if my elbows are never deeper than my rib cage here, I'm always going to have that short punch. Right? If I start bringing my elbows and it's breaking behind my back, I've now opened up my chest. I've also increased the range that I have to have in order to make the punch, which is it's slowed it down. Because where are your hands faster from? Are they faster from here or back here? That's an obvious one, right?
Not only that, but Steve, if I was to take a bench like 300 pounds and I would take it all the way down to here, a lot of times it'll bury me down here. But if I could take 400 pounds probably right now from here and just do this. So we're much stronger right here than we are back in here. We're weaker down here. So where do you want your punch to be? Is from right here this far, 6-inch punch right here. That's the strongest, the best way to maximize whatever strength you have upper body, is to just have that 6-inch right out here, and you're going to be way better, way quicker, and you're going to be more effective that way.
Right. More speed, more power, both. And you lose both by cocking your arms back. So it's definitely something to think about. And there are, again, tons of drills that we can do to work on. We won't get into all the drills today, but there are certainly a lot of things that we can work on to increase our hand speed and our punch.
And then, the thing that's cool nowadays too is this isn't just pass blocking; it's how you run block too.
Right.
Everything we're doing now is all in here with run and pass block. So the game is evolving. It's keeping the head more out, getting more of the hips and the hands and the punch in for both run and pass. So even if you're a full run type offense where you pass the ball 3 times a game, that doesn't matter. It's still the same exact mechanics that we're working on in today's line drills, both defense and offensively. It's all hands and hips, and of course legs in that too, but it's not putting the head in and using your head and body so much like it used to be.
Well, and I think that's why we're seeing too, there are very few teams now that are doing the old chicken wing stuff. I mean, I know there's still some that do it, but I think one of the issues with that is you can't take your head out when you block like this.
Right.
You can't. You got to use the head. Your head becomes the battering ram. And I'm not saying we don't use our head with our hands. We do. It happens. But we're not leading with our head. You have to lead with your head when you're doing this stuff. I remember blocking like this as a kid. Grab your jersey and using the chicken wings. Right. It's just it's just not. Guys are too athletic now to do that stuff. If you're not using your hands, you're going to get beat. If not at the lower levels, certainly if you have any chance of playing at a college level or even an elite high school level, you got to use your hands. I mean, there's got to be a point where you're using your hands. That's just, again, I know there are some people that still believe in the shoulder block, and there's a time and a place for that in certain schemes, but I really think you got to be using your hands the majority of the time you're blocking. So, all right, the last one we talked about here was pass sets. We talked about pass sets. Now, again, I know there are systems, and Coach just said it, where you're only going to pass 3 times a game. I understand that. But the things that you're learning when you are working on pass sets, again, that stuff still translates into becoming a better football player, because it's body position, It's still punch. It's lean. It's takeoff. It's just takeoff in a different way. It's agility. It's all stuff that's going to help you become a better player. And again, for kids that want to play at an elite level, if you go from high school to college and you've never pass blocked before, it's going to be a struggle because it's something you got to learn. You just have to learn how to do it. And I think the game is evolving. I think we're seeing less and less of the teams that only pass 3 times a game. And I really do believe that there is a place for it, really, in any training system for kids to learn that. Don't you, Coach?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, it really is it's another skill that you add to your repertoire of being an offensive lineman. And, you know, I can use my own example. When I was at Wisconsin, my senior year, we went from a I team to a veer team. And we didn't practice my whole senior year really doing much pass blocking. It was all run block, this, you know, that, and it hurts you because when that's my senior year going from there, then going into the NFL and having to relearn all the stuff that I had known 2 years prior was not easy. It was difficult. And the more you can practice it, the more you can study it, the more you can learn. You know, come to trench training. We can help you with pass blocking. You know, even if you don't do it there, go online. You know, do whatever you can to look at the whole entire picture if you're planning on going to the next level, because you're absolutely right. Unless you leave a high school, you know, and maybe you're a wishbone team that passes 4 times a game, and then you're going to go look for a college that all they do is run block. Well, then you don't have to spend much time. But really, if you want to go to other levels, you really do need to work on that skill. And it's a time-consuming. You need to take a lot of time and practice to really learn the proper, correct way to do pass blocking. Most high school coaches are going to do the gap thing where they just tell you to go block whatever's in the gap and just do the best you can, basically. You know, I mean, that's because there's not enough knowledge or enough practice time to spend working on that specific skill. But as a player, you know, what I would suggest is to do whatever you can to learn. And, you know, again, I mean, you know, obviously promoting our program, come work with us. We'll help you pass block and work through all of that, even if you don't do it at your school. So, yeah, I agree with you, Steve. It's definitely an art, and it's definitely something that you need if you're going to go on to other levels.
Yeah, and you know the funny thing about that is, if you listen to a lot of NFL coaches, their gripe is guys can't run block out of college.
True.
You know, it's weird, isn't it?
Yes.
The kids can't pass block out of high school. And they unlearn the run blocking and physicalness when they get in college. And that when it comes time to look for NFL players, guess where they all come from? They all come from those Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan,
Alabama.
You know, all those physical teams. That's where all your offensive linemen are coming from, because frankly, those are the ass kickers. You know, and that's what those guys are looking for. So it's a balance. You know, and I think that's the thing that's kind of getting lost in college football right now. And I think there's going to be a resurgence. I think there already is. I already think it's swinging back a little bit away from the complete spread offense, because these guys that are running spread offense, they're scoring 50 or 60 points, but all their defenses are giving up 50 or 60 points. You know, I don't know if it's because they have to spend so much time on it. I don't know what it is. But it seems like every team that runs that can't play defense. How's that work?
But here's the thing: did you watch the Seattle?
Yeah.
Who was that? I can't remember who they played. But
Arizona.
Wow, yeah. 3-3. I mean, it was like it was like old school football, you know. And neither team could run, so they had to try and run and pass, and that wasn't working. So it was a defensive. I mean, it was just bam. They were just doing it, and I think you're right. I think the swing is going to go back around to, you know, you have to have a ball-controlled offense that can run the football. And all your great offenses and your great teams, you know, they're putting their best players on defense, and then they're taking whatever's left and they're trying to get an offense that can play ball control. and
Mhm.
run everything, and then all their passes is starting to come off of the run. If you're successful at run, and that's the teams that are going to win. They're going to be over 500 every year, and they're going to go into the playoffs, and they're going to knock off some of these, like you and I talked about earlier, Steve. You know, the Oregons of the world that are scoring 60, 70 points. How many times are they winning a national championship?
Right.
I don't think they ever have. And you look at Alabama, who's won how many? You know, a ton. And they they stick with the basics. You know, they run the ball, and then pass off of it.
Well, don't you think though that I really think that a team like for instance, Texas Tech and Baylor and Oregon and some of these schools that have the run and shoot stuff, they're running all that stuff in practice.
Yep.
So they're not able to give a good physical look to their defense. And I think the offense that they run causes their defense to suffer because they never play against a physical team in practice.
That's a good point.
They play against a soft body position, unphysical front, and they get it handed to them when they play, the big, more physical schools. And I think it's a trend again that I think we're going to see swing back the other way. I think we already have. I really think it started to swing back into more power offense and more balance, I guess, because I think that the unbalance of some of those programs is the soft. It's so unbalanced to a soft position, spread offenses that I think we're going to start to see that swing back again. So, So again, I think that working on these skills year round, it's something that we've talked a lot about. It's the reason we developed trench training is to be able to work with kids that aren't getting this kind of work in the off season. And our goal is to raise the level of play on the line, on both sides of the ball at all levels. And try to help coaches and help players understand what the skills are and give them the best ways that we know how to teach them. And I think by doing that, we've already seen vast improvements in the kids who have been through trench training this year, and it's been really exciting to see them play. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Okay, I think that's all I've got, Coach.
Was a good show. Good show, Steve.
Awesome. All right. Hey, guys, make sure if you are not a member at Trench Training, go and get your free membership. Absolutely free. All you have to do is go there, enter your name and email address, get a password, and you are golden. You've got access to our free content. It's only accessible with membership. You can also get access to our private Facebook group where we really want to start creating more engagement there, getting more people in there. So if you do have a membership, make sure you get over and get into that Facebook group because that's where we want to try and get more of a conversation going this off season and into the next fall. So we hope to see you over there. All right.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Coach.
Thanks, guys. Play big.
All right. We will see you next week on Tuesday in the Trenches. Make sure you play big. Bye-bye.